Hey everyone, welcome to Remap. My name is Jared, and today I want to take a look at Borderlands 3. Alright, I know it's been a while since our last episode, but this one's a doozy. Game took me a little while to play. Y'all know how it is. So, been playing this game on the Xbox Series X with the next gen patch on resolution mode. And as always, these are just my opinions of the game. But before I get started, with my review and my thoughts, I want to quickly touch on, an aspect of sequels in video games. Since this is the third iteration in the Borderlands franchise, we had Borderlands 1 and 2, both extremely successful games. And I wanted to just quickly touch on, how people view, not how people, how I view sequels, and how I had to sort of change how I thought about games while I was playing through this one. So Borderlands 2, was one of my, and still is, one of my favorite games of all time. And it's difficult not to compare games, in a franchise. In fact, it's impossible, when you have a direct sequel in a franchise, you're just, it needs to live up to the hype, where, all the characters and elements keep reoccurring in each game, and early on in my playthrough, and none of this stuff is spoilers at all, just so we're clear. Early on in my playthrough, I found myself comparing this entry to the previous ones, and being like, oh, I wish it did this, I wish it did that, all these different things I wanted to be different. But then I realized that for me to just, sit down and enjoy this game, I'd have to remove, my nostalgia glasses, and play the story that the developers worked on, and then form my opinion of, oh, I like what they did with this, like what it did with that. It doesn't mean I have to love everything they did. You best believe that for, the later part of this review, I got some things to say. But, it's important to go into games, especially sequels, with an open mind, and realize the fact that the developers have a vision, give them a chance, play it through. And if you don't like it, that's fine. But don't go into it with an opinion already formed of what you want. Because, I wasn't able to enjoy this game until I stepped back and I changed my way of thinking. But with that all said, this is going to be structured like my previous episodes. We're going to start out with a spoiler-free review, and then later on I'm going to be talking about specific plot points that I liked, didn't like. So don't worry, I'll let you know before I get into spoilers. This is the spoiler-free review, retrospective, whatever you want to call it, of Borderlands 3. So to start off graphically, the game looks great. It's not some hyper-real style, like a Call of Duty, a Battlefield, any of these shooters, or even a, cartoonish, out there, third-person view. It's just good old Borderlands. There's no other way to say that. If you've never seen a Borderlands game, just go on YouTube or just Google it. Take 5 seconds. It's a really unique style. It's that sort of cel-shaded design. I know some people don't like it being called that. That's what, most people view it as. Really great design. You'll like looking at the game. Environments are a very unique aspect of the game compared to the predecessors. You've got some beautiful environments, especially running on this next gen hardware. The game looks great. All right. Tons of different unique locations. I never felt that, an area was boring. There was always enough to see, enough to look at. And it was really unique compared to its predecessors in just the amount of color that the game had, which I really liked. And I was also really happy with how the game ran. My expectations for that were very high since I waited until the next gen patch on the Xbox Series X. Solid 60, very rare frame drops only when, there's tons of particles on the screen, but they were very brief, just quarter of a second. I get, frame drop to like 30. Like I can deal with that. That's fine. There's really no reason to play it in performance mode You got to keep it on the graphical mode because it'll run at 60, and the game looks so much better than on performance mode. But moving on to the sound design, as always, pretty great. Weapons sound great. The voice acting I thought was really nice. There's a lot of characters from previous games, a lot of new characters. As always, solid job with voice acting. Did not feel as stale as some voice acting is in certain games. But well, the one thing I was actually surprised by was the soundtrack was a lot more, what's the word, memorable than previous games. Like the sounds that fit certain environments, the soundtrack in the background, actually really nice. I was able to, you always like having this feeling, being able to get more into a fight or a scene based off of the soundtrack. That means you did a pretty good job with the soundtrack. Like, if I'm getting into a certain area because of, or the music is a contributing factor to that, that's awesome. There's a saxophone song plays during a boss fight that, it makes the boss fight go from, okay, it's a boss fight to, this is pretty great. Like, I'm not going to lie, I'm having a blast with this. But, so far, this has been all positives, you know what I mean? But looks and sounds mean nothing, if the characters are annoying to control. And I say annoying to control because there's nothing worse than sitting down with a game and having the controls just be awful. But fortunately, as always, I keep saying as always, but it's the truth, it's just classic Borderlands. If you haven't played a Borderlands game, it's just a great, solid FPS feel. It's if you want a comparison, it's not as slow as like a Call of Duty, but it's not as fast paced as a Titanfall. They did add sliding into Borderlands 3, which I thought was hallelujah. Finally, thank you for adding sliding. But for some reason, the default controls didn't have the D-pad as the weapon swap, which honestly, that's just a travesty. Like, literally the first thing you need to do when you start playing is go change it to the old school Borderlands controls where the D-pad swaps your weapons, because that's just unnecessary. And speaking of the weapons, the guns, I mean, they felt great. I know they were advertising, a bazillion guns or something, but there really is a great variety in the weapon selection. When I'm playing an RPG, especially an RPG shooter, you don't want to get complacent with the weapons. You don't want to get one gun and just use the same thing for every encounter. It can get old pretty quick. Some people might enjoy, knowing exactly what to have every time. And yes, that's important, but you got to freshen it up in a game like this. And fortunately, they did it right. I found myself switching up guns way more than I was expecting. Yes, there are some manufacturers and specific models that I'd gravitate to, and if I found one, I'd be like, oh yes, I'm using this. But I always felt I could find something a little cooler, which has really been a hallmark of the Borderlands games, and I thought was executed well in Borderlands 3, is that, when I got a new legendary drop, it's always, oh, what did I get? It's something new, something crazy. That feeling of discovery is always great to have, and I really appreciated that. And some of the guns did feel overpowered, like just completely broken, which I like about Borderlands games. You want to have some guns that's like, oh, what is this gimmick? What is this crazy thing? And you have another gun that's just completely broken, like that adds to the fun of getting new weapon drops. But just a small side note, as in all the Borderlands games, you have plenty of the end game content, True Vault Hunter, Ultimate Vault Hunter mode. Just for full transparency, I didn't play through them. The campaign took me a long time to play. I've got a busy schedule. This ain't my full-time job. So I played through the whole normal mode, and I'm like, you know what? I've played True Vault Hunter and Ultimate Vault Hunter for hundreds of hours in Borderlands 2. I kind of know how it works. But plenty of endgame content, as always. And if you've noticed, so far, I've had pretty much nothing bad to say, which is really great, to when I'm writing these reviews and being like, wow, I genuinely enjoyed all these aspects. But as I was writing this, I didn't feel in sync with what I was writing. I'm thinking about it like, oh, okay, graphically, gameplay, sound design, blah, 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 et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All of these aspects were great. They were all implemented really well. But why do I feel that something's missing? And my only complaints really are writing related, which is a very personal and specific complaint. But I was worried going in that the humor wouldn't stick. And there's definitely some rough patches, it's very meta humor. If I'm sorry, if this is your first Borderlands game and you know nothing about the franchise, you are probably going to be like super confused. The humor's not going to, it might be a mess, okay? But, the voice acting is great. It fits the personality of the villains, but I just didn't like some of the things they did. As a longtime Borderlands player, and as I mentioned, these are super, the nostalgia glasses are on, super specific complaints. Not stuff gameplay wise for the a large percentage of players. This isn't going to matter to them, but you may say, hey Jared, isn't that the studio's job to deliver the story and not yours? You're exactly right. I still want to complain. There were still some aspects that didn't sit right to me. They just didn't feel right. Long-winded ramble right here for the last minute or so. With all that being said, I'm giving Borderlands 3 an A-. Okay, this is a legitimately great game with great gameplay, great guns, a lot of fun. You'll have a blast playing it. My only real complaints are story related. I'm not going to get into that now. I'm going to get into that in a few minutes. So if you've played 1 and 2 and you want to give 3 a shot, by all means give it a shot. I feel like you will enjoy the game. If you haven't played 1 or 2, you can go try playing Borderlands 3, but just be aware, you might be really confused really fast. But am I nitpicking? Yes, but this is my podcast. I can do whatever I want. So, with all that being said, I want to get into some spoiler territory. So if you haven't played it, now's the time to leave. You've been listening to Remap. My name is Jared. Thank you so much for listening. I know it's been a long wait. I've got some other exciting games to review coming up sooner rather than later. If you're still here, awesome. I want to talk about some specifics. So it's as I mentioned earlier, I'm pretty sure it's one of the more difficult reviews I've had to do just because of how, I couldn't narrow down like, oh, I hate this gameplay mechanic or I hate this. It's all writing related. I thought that they didn't utilize the old characters in a way that I wanted. Okay. And just so it's not me complaining, I want to try explaining this a little bit. They had the old characters, but they didn't have them in the essential role that you saw them in Borderlands 2. In Borderlands 2, the whole game revolves around the previous game's characters, the previous Vault Hunters. You're working together, you're growing together, and now that I'm thinking about it, my favorite and most impactful moments of Borderlands 3 were with the old Vault Hunters. I jumped into this game loving the first 2 entries, getting to know the characters, excited to see their next steps. If and this is spoilers for Borderlands 2, if you think about with Borderlands 2, all the character moments were the ones that were the most impactful. Like Roland's death, I still remember that. That shocked me. That hurt because they built up such a great, relationship with the characters. And I just felt like in Borderlands 3, they brought these characters back, but they were just on the sideline. Okay? You're in Sanctuary, you've got Marcus, and you've got Moxie there. You don't have a huge variety of missions with them. Ellie's there. Oh, I was happy to see Ellie. You only talked to her like twice. And then looking at the Borderlands 3 missions, when I started to get into the game was when the old characters were impacted. When Tyreen took Lilith's powers, I was like, you done messed up. We got to go, get this right. But then when they killed Maya, I was shocked. I was hurt. Like that was a, impactful moment for me because I had, I knew who the character was. She was in Borderlands 2. I played as her. Great character. I thought she was introduced well. I was, interested to see where she was going. And I thought they killed her off so quickly in the story that every time I saw an old character, I was worried they'd be killed too. Part of me was like, oh my gosh, yes, I'm so happy I'm seeing this character again. But then with how the game was set up with, okay, Act 1, Lilith gets her powers taken. Act 2, Maya gets killed. Oh no, who are they going to kill in Act 3? And it was just making me nervous. I felt that if they waited to kill off Maya later, maybe at the end of Eden 6, it would have felt much more appropriate for the story. And even with that, if you didn't play Borderlands 2, honestly, that do you even care? Like you probably are impacted by it, but you've only known that character for a short period of time. There's no reason to, get super hurt by it. But, as I mentioned a couple minutes ago, with all the old characters, my favorite moments in Borderlands 3 were the missions with the old characters. Seeing Brick and Mordecai and Tina, that was awesome. That was great. I loved those missions. It was so much nostalgia, so great to see. But, they were side missions. They weren't integrated into the main story like we saw Vault Hunters integrated in the main story of Borderlands 2. And as I've mentioned 20 times, this is super nitpicky. But it's how I feel. That nostalgia of seeing the characters was I think why I enjoyed Borderlands 2 so much. Was they kept the same characters, they kept the same world, and yes, by expanding to new worlds and expanding new characters, they created some great new moments in Borderlands 3, but they also lost some of that, magic from the previous game. But don't get me wrong, I thought a lot of the new characters they added were excellent. Lorelei, Reese, Rainwright, Typhon. I thought Typhon was hilarious. I love collecting the Typhon logs. Like, that was just great. But none of them had that connection that the old Vault Hunters and the old characters had. And if you think about it, it wouldn't be possible because they're new characters. They're just being introduced to me. The whole thing is with the old characters and the old Vault Hunters, there's 2 games and hundreds of hours of playtime that I have built a relationship with those characters. And this is really why I still gave the game a great review, because it's just picking on, the writing. And I thought, like, it's so hard to quantify aspects like this, but if you've played the Borderlands franchise, I know you know exactly what I mean. Because it's just a departure from what we were previously used to. And I know that with Borderlands 4, which I'm sure is going to happen at some point, who knows how long that's going to take, when the characters from Borderlands 3 are in Borderlands 4, I feel like I'm going to have such a better opinion about Borderlands 4 just because I'm going to have that previous relationship with the characters built up through, a few dozen hours of playtime already. And then one final thing before I get to a lot of the stuff I enjoyed, because don't get me wrong, I did enjoy this game. I had a blast with it. One thing that I was very disappointed by was Claptrap. Like, to me, he might have been my favorite character. Probably was my favorite character in the previous entries. Like, so many memorable lines, so many memorable missions, and in this game, he's nothing. He gets a handful of lines. There's like one mission with him or two. That really hurt. All right, that really hurt. But I still want to talk about some of my favorite moments because this, as I said, great game. Wainwright and Hammerlock, absolutely adorable. And then speaking of Wainwright, I loved seeing all the different manufacturers and their planets. Like, there was so much more style and color that it was awesome to see. Eden 6 with the rogues and Clay, thought they were super cool. I really loved Clay as a character. You got Promethea with Atlas fighting against Malawan. Reese trying to, lead the fight, and Respawn. Just hilarious and great moments. Now, I get why Torg, wasn't highlighted since it was, arguably the best DLC in Borderlands 2, and they've already showcased Torg and all his stuff. But man, I thought they did Torg dirty in Borderlands 3. I never found myself using Torg guns, like, ever. They may be better in the end game, but I did not find a single Torg gun that when I used it, I was like, oh wow, this is an upgrade. I thought they were all just terrible. Balex was awesome. It's all this Eden 6 stuff. I thought Eden 6 was definitely my favorite planet. But, Ice-T, underrated voice actor. He was one of the most memorable characters. Gears of War 3, I'm glad that he's getting more work. I want to see him in more games. Very underrated voice actor. And I know I mentioned earlier, I really did enjoy Typhon's story. I was glad I got most of the logs before meeting him, because it was actually nice, knowing the story. But for this final segment of this whole discussion, we're over 20 minutes in. Thank you for bearing with me. This has been a much more long-winded and less structured discussion, just because of, my opinions of this game. But for this final segment, I just want to run through some of my notes that I took while I played. Some different miscellaneous things while I play. So, one other complaint that I didn't mention in the bug sector is whenever I would enter Sanctuary, whenever I arrived, the Axton and Salvatore DLC little ad came on every single time. And I don't even need to look at my notes to know what they say. It's the little, hey, test, is this thing on? Hey, Vault Hunter, we have an opportunity for you. That got burned into my brain because every single time I loaded into Sanctuary, I heard that message, and I was very annoyed with the fact that literally half of Sanctuary is just ads for the DLC. Like, yes, I understand there's DLC. I understand you're trying to sell it to me, but I just paid money for this game. Why is Sanctuary filled with these? They look like quest markers, but they're not. For tons of money's worth of DLC. Like, I already bought the game. Come on. And just a minor thing, why do you have platforming in an FPS? When you're trying to get the little radio towers for the Moxie side quests, why do you have platforming in an FPS? It's a gimmick. I hate it. I think a lot of people hate it. just stop it. But so some of the other missions I really enjoyed, the Private Beans mission, Invasion of Privacy, absolutely hilarious. If you did not play that mission during your playthrough, you need to go back and play that mission, because it might have been the most hysterical mission in the game. But the final fight with Reese on Promethea, it's probably my favorite boss fight in the game. Just to the music. I know I mentioned it probably 20 minutes ago, but that little smooth jazz song, I've even got it as the intro to this episode. The thing was just a banger. Like, what a great moment. And the Lord of Skag's side quest, such a meta side quest. I was really interested with how they changed a lot of the humor to more meta humor, and I was really happy that it did stick with me. I did enjoy it. But the one mission that I want to mention that was very memorable, but not in a happy way, was the Life of the Party mission. And this might be the most emotional and just... This mission hurt. It's called Life of the Party. Go play it or look it up. I'd recommend playing it instead of looking it up so you get the full feeling of it. But man, I'm not going to spoil it. That is an emotionally taxing. It makes me sad just thinking about it. Like that, hats off to the team for being able to just write such an impactful mission like that. I was sad to see, in terms of weapons, that corrosive is straight up useless again. I literally never found myself using corrosive guns. There's very few enemies with high armor, and it's better off to just use radiation instead. Radiation, super cool elemental damage to be added. I feel like you can just replace corrosive with it. Some of the best guns, in my opinion. I was happy to see the fastball was still broken, as always. The Flood, super great pistol. The Jacobs scatter guns were really my bread and butter. I was running Amara, and those shotguns were just excellent. The big boy rockets, I never found myself using rocket launchers. Like, normally, I would just always find a rocket launcher that had big boy rockets, and I would just switch my rocket launcher, fire a big boy rocket, and then switch off to a different gun every time I was downed, and it literally worked every single time. Absolutely broken. And then a couple final missions and final items. Childhood's End, very, very interesting backstory on Handsome Jack. And it made me feel bad for him. It really humanized him in a new way that I thought was really great to see. Just a small thing, a small mission that didn't even need to be in there, but I really enjoyed it. And when I was playing through, I was expecting Tyrene to be the one to betray Troy. They got me there, but the foreshadowing is very clear that they'd have some problems. But I do want to say, the greatest bamboozle of all time happens in this game, or happened. If you're listening to this and listening to all these spoilers, I hope you've played it, because when they give you that little countdown screen, I was weak. They got me good. And oh my goodness, they continues in Borderlands 4. I'm sitting here like, what? Are you kidding me? I know they're not dead. You're going to make me wait. Oh, nope, you got me. That, hats off to the team. Absolutely incredible. And just before I get to the end, I know this has been a ramble, but I'm just looking through my notes right here. There's a lot. It's a big RPG. There's a lot of stuff in it. Transaction packed, great quality satire in a mission. And Sparrow and Grouse on Necrotafeo, hilarious. I don't know who I want to see them in more games. Like, I want to see a little Sparrow and Grouse DLC or a Sparrow and Grouse Borderlands 4 as a character. Like, they were hilarious. But, you know, the game got more serious with Typhon and his kids, you know, over time. You know, I'm just talking about the ending and leading up to the ending now. You know, it hits with the brutal line from Typhon. I'm not saying I'm glad my boy is dead, but at least he can't hurt people no more. That's just poor guy. Poor guy. And it's the same situation as Borderlands 2. Oh no, my kid's a siren. Let me lock them up. And their mom has tragically died, so I'm the only one that can raise them. Like, it's just tough. But one of the best jokes in the game was during this, you know, final aspect where Typhon explains that, you know, she watches over it when he's talking about going to get the final vault key. And, you know, you go to his wife's grave and you start digging in the grave. And then he's just, oh, not in here. It's in the headstone. That's just funny. Like, it's moments like that no other video game franchise has comedy like that. But such a sad ending for Typhon. He literally tried to suicide bomb his daughter. Like, oh. It was just depressing, but it was getting me engaged. You know, I was ready to avenge him and beat the game, but golly, what an anticlimactic boss fight. It's a super abrupt cutscene. You don't see anything about the transformation. You know, she just falls over a cliff and then shows back up big and ugly. There's no, you know, big emotional weight to the transformation. And then, you know, the boss fight is just big bullet sponge. I'm not even, you know, it wasn't a huge challenge. And then I enter the quote unquote Great Vault, and you know what was in it? Do you know what was in the Great Vault? A bunch of green guns. And I know they put the Lilith chest at the end, but wouldn't it have made more sense if those OP chests or that OP chest was in the, I don't know, the Great Vault? Like, it's just the little things. And then there's, you know, Lilith's whole situation. Like, I'm sitting here like, what's she gonna do? 1v1 the moon? You know, the ending to me was super abrupt. It's obviously it's setting up for Borderlands 4, you know, and it's trying to find Lilith. And it just didn't resonate with me. But they had Alicia Keys in the credits, so I can't be that mad. But all in all, it's a really good game. You just have to look past its predecessor. I really appreciate anyone that has listened this long, because this last 10-15 minutes has just been a ramble fest. Because, you know, as I mentioned, it's impossible to quantify that feeling you get when you're playing a game, and it's just off. You know what I mean? It's nothing graphics-wise. It's nothing gameplay-wise. It's just something doesn't sit right. And that's what I was hoping to, not explain, because I didn't really explain it, but hoping to discuss today. But thank you so much for listening today. You've been listening to Remap, the gaming podcast. My name is Jared, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.